All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Power for the People, Local and Global Perspectives on Community Energy Systems. My name is Twyla Neely-Strite, and I'm the Education and Operations Associate at Illinois Green Alliance. Today's program was put on by the Illinois Green Alliance Programs Committee, a volunteer group that coordinates education events covering a wide range of topics throughout the year for the green building industry. The team that organized today's event consists of Dan Mooring, Sophia Soul, and Ian Firestone. We have you all muted upon entry, so please type any questions you have into the Q&A and we'll get them answered at the end. And this webinar is being recorded and will be sent out to you all in a follow-up email through Eventbrite. For those who are unfamiliar, Illinois Green Alliance is a membership-driven nonprofit organization that advances green buildings and sustainable communities for all. Our 5-year strategic plan pushes the green building industry to meet or get on the path to net zero. We achieve this work through education events such as panels and building tours, by engaging communities and partnering with organizations across Illinois, and by advocating for new policies and legislation. Members can view our recorded webinars through our on-demand webinar library on our website. And you can also learn about membership and see upcoming events and get involved by visiting our website, illinoisgreenalliance.org. This webinar is approved for AIA for 1 LU-HSW credit and can be logged for 1 LEED AP or Green Associate CE hour. Certificates of completion for both AIA members and non-AIA members are available upon request. To request AIA CE credit or a personalized certificate of completion for architecture license, CE reporting purposes, follow this QR code on your screen, and I think we're going to also put that link in the chat, and you can just complete a quick form and we will be in touch. For those interested in self-reporting CE hours for your LEED AP or LEED Green Associate credentials, we'll be sharing a self-reporting instruction page and a fillable certificate of completion in our follow-up email for all attendees next week. And here are today's learning objectives. I also want to take a quick moment to recognize Illinois Green Alliance's sustaining sponsors who make our work possible. A special thank you to our gold level sponsors, ComEd, USGBC, and Sloan. Make a commitment to advancing green buildings in communities across the state by visiting illinoisgreenalliance.org/sponsorship. Now on to the main event. We have a great lineup of speakers for today. James Feinstein is a policy director at Arcadia, where he leads strategic initiatives to expand and improve clean energy programs across the country. He has spent his career working on climate and clean energy policy and has served for 2 U.S. senators and in the Obama administration. James received a BA from Luther College, a Master of Public Policy from Georgetown University, and served as a Fulbright Scholar in Thailand. Marina Minic is part of the Citizens Utility Board outreach team and works as the Solar Programs Coordinator. Citizens Utility Board, or CUB, is a nonprofit consumer protection organization that represents utility ratepayers across the state of Illinois and advocates for cleaner and more affordable energy. Marina works to educate communities about solar, advocate for and implement clean energy policy, and engage in one-on-one consumer assistance. Tom Olmsted is a senior energy engineer and project manager with Ramboll, with a focus on renewable district energy and industrial decarbonization projects in Illinois. We'll be guided through today's information by Dan Mooring, a project manager at Slipstream, focused on sustainable planning, design, and community development. Remember to add your questions to the Q&A function, and Dan and our speakers will address them at the end. And I'm going to pass it over to Dan and our speakers now.
Great, thank you so much, Twyla. We're delighted to have a great panel here on the to join our discussion today. I'm Dan Mooring. I'm the co-chair of the Programs Committee, and we've got a lot of stuff to cover. So let's start right into it. Just to get started and kind of set the table, let's talk a little bit about the mechanics and the real essences of the what of community energy systems. So we're going to kind of do a couple round robins here, and I'd love for Tom to start it out and kind of lay the table for us about some key concepts of community energy systems with a focus again on design, construction, and engineering. So without further ado, please take it away, Tom.
Thank you, Dan. Again, Tom Olmsted, Senior Energy Engineer at Ramboll, a Danish engineering firm based here in Chicago. A lot of my work is sort of global or distributed regionally, but excited to have more and more work here in the Midwest. This next slide. So we'll talk about a few different types of community energy systems throughout the presentation here. My primary focus is, again, going to be on district energy, so district heating and cooling networks or thermal energy networks. I'll kind of go through what they are, different variations and innovations, some case studies, and really why they're one of the fastest ways to electrify heating and decarbonize it at scale. So really kind of the focus is to educate public officials, real estate developers, community organizations that they exist and how they can be implemented. So next slide, 12. So what is district energy? Really, it's any type of a centralized heating and cooling distribution system to a various network of buildings. You kind of think of it as a thermal grid, basically. So the electricity grid is sort of a distributed energy network. District energy is a distributed thermal network. It's been around for quite a while, since the 1800s. It's very popular in Europe, especially Northern Europe, Eastern Europe. A lot of home and building heating is generated centrally and distributed by district energy. It's in the US as well, but a bit more limited. Some older cities, it's a bit more prominent. College campuses, really where you would see it the most. It's been somewhat ignored with the, advent and distribution of natural gas to buildings, middle of the last century, but it's kind of making a resurgence here. If you go to, or no, we're on the right slide. Nope, go back, sorry. The rest of what I'll dig into is really going to focus on the most recent generations of district energy. All new systems kind of fall into this fourth generation district heating or cooling, or an ambient loop, sometimes referred to as a fifth generation heating cooling system. So attributes of a fourth generation system: centralized heat pumps and heating and cooling, various other types of heat sources used, geothermal, wastewater data centers, that sort of thing, incorporating thermal energy storage, and just optimized for the lowest cost, lowest carbon per BTU. Ambient loop systems, rather than sending hot and cold water to buildings, you're sending lukewarm or ground temperature water to buildings, and each building would have a heat pump utilizing that as a heat source. So the heat's then distributed back and forth through that ambient loop into usually a networked geothermal type system, but can also utilize other heat sources as well. So I think actually Marina will probably talk a little bit about one specific system that falls into that category in a bit, and I'll touch on a few case studies in Denmark as well as applications in the US.
Great.
I think turn to James to.
Thanks so much, Tom. Yeah, I think we kind of have a broad understanding of kind of some of the essences of supply and demand that go around energy from a design perspective and district energy systems. Let's get to the next slide, and I'll introduce James to talk a little bit more about Arcadia's work. And James, we'd love to talk, have you explain more about your work with community energy systems, especially around aspects of policy and market development, and how that helps get more clean energy into our communities. So please take it away, James.
Yeah, thanks. And also, I just a shout out for all of Tom's district cooling. I'm based in Austin, Texas, and we have a number of district cooling districts. And they're wildly popular and a really good thing. So that's, yeah, great technology. Right, so I'm with Arcadia. It's a climate tech company. We have just shy of $1 billion in VC funding from entities like JP Morgan. And we have two main product offerings. If you don't mind turning to the next slide, I'll talk about the unrelated one first, which is just an energy data access tool. The genesis behind this is to date, utilities have generally had kind of a stranglehold on energy data, but we're convinced that if you democratize energy data so customers can actually control and use and access their own data, we can decarbonize a lot more quickly and a lot faster while saving people money. But if you don't mind moving to the next slide, I'll talk specifically about community solar. So yeah, the main one we're going to talk about today is community solar. So some of the stats on here talk about that platform business and some talk about community solar. Community solar was originally designed to offer the benefits of rooftop solar to everyone who doesn't have access to the roof. So from our analysis, about 2/3 of Americans either rent, they have a poor roof pointing in the wrong direction, a low FICO score, trees that shade the roof, or other things that prevent them from being able to access rooftop solar. So because we think this is a great benefit, policymakers saw a great opportunity to build comparable projects where you build a slightly larger project in a neighborhood or on a nearby warehouse or Amazon distribution center, and you allow, instead of, again, putting those panels on your roofs, you as a home or a renter can subscribe to that project, and then you'll get guaranteed savings, which are at a comparable rate to what you'd save if you had a rooftop system on your monthly electricity bill. So it's this great product where everyone in the state of Illinois is better off if they're on community solar because of the guaranteed savings requirement. And you have this added benefit of supporting local clean energy and the jobs that go to create those solar fields and maintain them for the 30-year life of them. So we're really excited about that product. Again, Arcadia, we currently manage about 2.5 gigawatts, which serves, as you can see here, just shy of 300,000 subscribers. So we're really excited about that. Of that, we have about 300 megawatts in Illinois. So if you don't mind just briefly turning to the next slide. This is kind of the footprint of community solar. So you can see Illinois is kind of one of the precious few states with this amazing, what we think of as an unimpeachable energy product. And it's definitely a leader. Again, that 300 megawatts could be compared to New York, which is approaching 10 gigawatts, and they're 1,000 megawatts in a gigawatt. So while Illinois is doing great, there's like huge opportunity to continue being a leading state. So if you can please turn to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about how community solar works. So I mentioned how you don't have to be sited with your solar panel. So some people call it like a virtual net metering setup. So as opposed to net metering your solar panels, again, you get those credits applied remotely. So how that works today is, each month your solar panels that solar field will be generating electricity that the utilities buy, and they get this cheap, clean solar power. They then provide credits, like bill credits, as in like added value to your utility bill, reducing the total amount you owe. And then the customer pays a portion of their savings to the project. So customers will always be saving money. And basically, instead of paying the utility for their kind of generic electricity mix, their electricity fee just goes straight to the community solar project. So supporting this direct, local, small project. So again, we see that as a great opportunity, and yeah, offers a lot of great benefits for communities. So yeah, that's what I've got for a quick intro on community solar.
Yeah, thank you so much, James. I think we're kind of seeing how the puzzle is coming together here between some of the engineering concepts and technologies, and then moving into the way that policy structures markets to get projects developed. We'll move to the next slide and the next speaker here, and have Marina talk a little bit about her work at CUB broadly, and some of the work that you do, and we'd love to really highlight the focus on, you know, making educating consumers, educating the public and folks in general, and how that plays into getting people to be smart shoppers in the community energy space. So please take it away, Marina.
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. Thank you to IGA for having me today. Again, Marina Minic. I'm the Solar Programs Coordinator with Citizens Utility Board, or CUB. And again, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that focuses on consumer protections for utility ratepayers. And we also really advocate for affordable and sustainable energy policies here in Illinois. Quick plug before we move on. We do have a hotline that you can call weekdays 9 to 5 if you have any utility issues, or again, if you get a community solar mailer and want to know more about it, you can call the hotline and ask, or if you're interested in geothermal, all these different things, you can call us and ask. We also have a website that has a lot of information. But yeah, we can go next. So again, CUB is actually, not really an environmental organization. We really are rooted in consumer protections, but we do see more renewables and things like community energy systems as the right path forward for consumers. So why are community energy systems good? I think we can really boil them down to 3 main topics. So affordability, climate/environment, and our health. So community energy systems can really help to lower the bills for consumers. That's something that James was kind of able to talk about in his slides. And if they're built intentionally, they can also help to keep dollars in the local economy, which is really great, again, for consumers. And again, community energy systems really help us to deploy renewables faster and more equitably. And the faster we're able to transition away from fossil fuels and toward renewables, the better able we are to help our environment and improve our outdoor and indoor air quality, and therefore our health. So lots of benefits here. And that's kind of the lens in which CUB views community energy systems. And then what do we actually work on within that realm? We can go next slide. A lot of CUB's work focuses on education, and I think education is key when talking about community solar. So we create lots of resources about community solar and how it works, which I'll talk about toward the end of the presentation. We also talk about how to file complaints or resolve issues with companies. So, we do get calls through the hotline, maybe an issue or someone's confused about a topic or it wasn't communicated correctly to them. So we're able to resolve those because, again, community solar is really a great program and widens access to solar for lots of people. So we want to make sure that it's able to work for people. Community solar can also oftentimes be confused with alternative electric suppliers. So that's another big part of our work, is helping consumers distinguish between those two things. And then we're constantly working on improvements and engaging in stakeholder processes. So getting things approved like consolidated billing. So rather than having a dual bill system in community solar where you're paying your utility bill and a community solar provider, if it can get to be all on your utility bill, that makes things a lot easier for consumers. And then focusing on income eligible community solar is also really important. I know Illinois is going to be home to a program called Clean Energy Connector, where customers of LIHEAP, which is the low income heating, I forget the name now, but it's essentially a energy assistance program, a federal program for people. If you're a customer of LIHEAP, you should also be automatically connected to community solar because they're both really wonderful benefits. So that's something that we'll see soon here. And then we also take part, or are taking part in a network geothermal pilot, which I will get into a bit later as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Marina. I know we're kind of making pretty good progress laying the groundwork and understanding things. So I put my own question in the chat there. We'll and encourage people to populate the Q&A and chat throughout with questions as they come up, because I'm really interested in that distinction, and I think our audience would be too, about community solar versus alternative providers. But for now, let's keep the progress going, and let's see how some of these concepts are landing, you know, in our backyard and really across the country and across the world. So, Marina, can you kind of keep digging in, if you will, pun slightly intended, about community energy systems, especially kind of the geothermal work you're doing and in Chicago right now. So please elaborate on how this is playing out.
Yeah, definitely. So this is one of the more tangible examples we have on our work in community energy systems. So back in 2023, the Department of Energy's Geothermal Technologies Office selected 11 projects to receive funding for community or network geothermal heating and cooling projects. Other components of those projects must include workforce development or training and working to identify and address environmental justice concerns in the area. So we can go next slide. Out of the urban/suburban projects that were selected, we were one of them, and the lead organization in this pilot is actually called Blacks and Green. They're a really wonderful organization that works on a variety of topics, but we're partnering with them to create this network geothermal project. And essentially this pilot, if selected, will span across 4 city blocks in the West Woodlawn neighborhood of Chicago, which is on the Chicago South Side. And that area would contain more than 100 multifamily and single-family residential buildings. So we can go next slide. Essentially, there are 2 phases to this pilot, and we're in phase 1. Phase 1 is kind of that planning phase, which will wrap up in October. And then hopefully shortly after that, we will find out if we are selected for phase 2, which would actually be to build the project. But some of the things that we're working on in phase 1, we're having a lot of community conversations to figure out what people in the community are in greatest need of. We're gathering baseline data, creating technical design, doing cost analysis, both for the system and the customer side, things like ownership and rate structure, and environmental impact analysis as well. I recently attended one of these events where we were able to talk to people in the community, and they actually brought their utility bills to the event for us to take a look at. And we did find that there is very high winter natural gas usage because of heating, and even high winter electric usage due to electric space heaters that are typically very inefficient. So again, this is really an exciting project that I think would deliver really tangible benefits to people in the communities. And the next slide is just kind of showing where that project would be. But again, 4 city blocks in the West Woodlawn neighborhood of Chicago. And it's, yeah, a little summary of what we've got going on. And fingers crossed that we get selected for phase 2 and actually can make this happen.
Great. Yeah, I know there's a lot of buzz inside of certain circles around the future of natural gas networks in Illinois as well as other states. And so this is happening on all the kind of levels that we're talking about, from a technology, from, you know, policy and markets, and ultimately from, you know, education and outreach. So just to continue kind of grounding ourselves in the realities and examples of community energy systems as they play out, Tom, can you take it over and kind of do a little bit more elaboration of how these concepts come together in different contexts and what we might be able to see and understand from your experience and your work with Ramboll?
Yeah, so that's a very exciting pilot that Blacks and Green and Cub are working on. Quite a bit about it. Excited to see, you know, more traction in Chicago. James mentioned district cooling in Austin. There's also quite a bit in Houston, I believe. But surprisingly, I think the largest in North America is right below many of our feet in Chicago. So district cooling, you know, district energy isn't entirely new to the region or foreign or, you know, scary. It's already here. I think the system's been operating since the 90s, entirely powered by, I guess, renewable electric supply. So claims to be the largest carbon neutral cooling system in the world, or in the US, excuse me. Also, UIC, they operate a combined heat and power plant that's distributed to the medical district there. There's other examples where this is used and, well established in the region. Jump to the next slide here. Sort of looking at, a next generation network based on some of our projects in Denmark. Copenhagen's district heating and cooling network is quite elaborate. Many different distributed heat sources with electric boilers, heat pumps, various types of heating and cooling storage. Northern Europe does rely quite a bit on biomass. There is some gas heating in the network for peaker plant type applications, and they do incinerate all their waste and co-generate heating and cooling from it, which we just bury it right and out of sight, out of mind. They do have some of the largest heat pump projects in the world. I think the largest is in Aalborg. I think it's a 30 megawatt heat pump. Pretty big. Incorporates geothermal and seawater heating and cooling. I think you can jump to the next slide quickly. Through this. So the approach to, that the Danes use, that we've sort of definitely incorporated into all of our projects, is evaluating heat sources. So if you're taking a 50,000 foot view, city or regional view or larger community view, look at all the heat sources available and, use them in order of quality. So this isn't to be dismissive of geothermal, it's right in the middle of the list. If the boundary of the project doesn't incorporate any of these other items, geothermal is probably the best choice. But for larger, city level type projects, there's plenty of free heat that's just being wasted. Industrial waste heat, wastewater treatment plants, combined heating and cooling can be tapped into, and thermal energy storage is rarely looked at in projects in the US and is commonplace in some of those projects in Europe. Next slide. So one such example of sort of industrial waste heat recovery, a project in Odense with a meta data center, just utilizing that waste heat from the data center to power 9 heat pumps and utilizing that heat, pushing that into an existing thermal energy network or district heating network. But again, this concept is commonplace and I think law in a lot of places in Europe. I think a takeaway here is Chicago, or the Chicago area, is home to over 100 relatively new data centers. Not one of them is utilizing that waste heat that I know of. So just dumping free heat into the atmosphere, which could otherwise be used. Just a very important thing to look at, if networks are being put into place, take a step back and look at other sources before drilling the boreholes for geothermal. There's another slide I had to cut, another big project in Copenhagen that utilizes not only waste heat from an industrial source, but a lot of geothermal, wastewater, tank thermal energy storage, and an aquifer utilized for thermal energy storage, which is also an interesting way to look at things. And let's see, next slide. Separate example, really quick. I thought it was just a good picture of a solar thermal generating system, and that hexagonal hole in the ground is actually pit thermal energy storage. So heat is generated typically at night. So Denmark has a lot of offshore wind. They have negative energy prices at night when there's excess wind energy. So they optimize heat pump operations to start generating heat, when electricity is free or you're paid to do it, and they just pump hot water into pits or tanks, borehole fields, or aquifers to store. Very low tech, orders of magnitude cheaper than battery storage, right? And without all the conversion losses there. So these systems are big, but extremely low cost to operate. So capital intensive, cheap to operate. I guess we can just jump to the next slide. So there's a lot of work, going on in this space. Again, the district energy, whether it looks more conventional or more like these European models, or some of these pilot projects that are more of an ambient loop system. A lot of momentum in the Northeast, Massachusetts, New York. There, we just finished up a pretty big project doing clean energy master planning for 12 SUNY campuses, State University of New York, where we modeled various different heating and cooling scenarios, business as usual versus just looking at centralizing heating and cooling versus decentralizing, and across the board, kind of the same trend. If every building has their own heating and cooling system, pretty inefficient. You're not really able to take advantage of economies of scale. So it's costly, more equipment, and relatively inefficient. Ambient loop systems are better, but in many cases, each building having their own heat pump can be CapEx intensive. Fully centralized systems ended up having the lowest life cycle costs. But again, this is sort of just a one example, maybe not applicable across the board. College campuses don't have summer occupancy or very limited cooling loads. So be very interested to see, especially in our region, more examples of how those costs really break down, especially when it applies to neighborhoods or municipalities.
Yeah, and I think our audience is going to be interested in that, some of those questions about cost and complexity. There is a clarifying question I'd like to just address before we move on to some examples from James about how the market benefits can be there. And that was just a clarifying question about what makes heat high. Talk more about heat quality and how should we understand that as we're kind of looking around our neighborhoods or communities. Yeah, please, if you could talk to that about just very briefly.
Yeah, exactly. So heat that's already being wasted. So chillers, there's cooling towers, on water cooled chillers. That's heat that could, the chiller could be repurposed or reconfigured to act as a heat pump. A chiller is a heat pump, just wasting energy or heat. Looking for those sources where the heat is already there, usually at a higher temperature than ambient conditions. Or, if we're looking at something like a wastewater treatment plant, effluent, it's sort of ambient temperature, but it really comes down to the flow. A very high volume of heat that can be tapped into for a heat pump, relatively cost effectively. So where you have high heat or high, flow available in a consistent way that can be more cost effectively harnessed than.
So the quality is kind of tied to either the density of the heat or its volume. Is that maybe a fair way to describe it?
Yep, exactly.
Great. So that's good, and I have all these kind of spatial concepts and questions, but I want to make sure that we can talk about when the energy supply and demand might be quite distant from each other. So I'd love to move over again to James to talk a little bit about how community energy concepts are playing out, and especially costs and benefits, and inuring those benefits to low and moderate income consumers. So James, can you talk a little bit more about community solar as and community energy systems broadly, but especially community solar and consumer benefits?
Definitely. So when community solar was kind of first envisioned, I mean, depending on who you ask, 10 to 15 years ago, one of the additional problems it was trying to solve is that people on the like kind of, renewable energy side of the equation were, it was a small umbrella, and they, their political capital didn't seem to be getting a whole lot done. So there's this idea of, by creating a program that would reach more customers and more people, and then that would mean you'd have more people having a positive experience with this product, with solar energy, that could create a better political buttress for this, and like kind of protect this and potentially create more opportunities to expand this. So the way community solar was originally envisioned was to solve this thing of bringing more people behind the effort to support clean energy deployment. The great shift over the past probably 3 to 4 years is, while these projects, community solar, were usually just both like commercial and industrial, and then just like mass market residential households, there's been a large policy shift, again, and this is community solar and beyond, to have a low income kind of component or requirement. So the most common you'll see is like aligning with the president's like Justice 40 initiative, where 40% of the benefits of the clean energy investment should or must flow to low and moderate income households. Likewise, many community solar programs have similar requirements like that. So the Illinois Solar for All has a huge low income requirement, which is great. And again, as I mentioned before, these customers can all participate with guaranteed savings that can support clean energy in their neighborhood. But we also see additional added benefits too. So from our experience, once someone has a positive interaction with Arcadia and they're receiving savings every month while they're supporting clean energy, they're more likely to participate in additional beneficial electrification. And what that means is they'd be more interested in, buying a heat pump, or signing up for free weatherization, or energy audits, and different things that different utilities and the state energy offices will offer. So we see community solar as this amazing entree where, for no risk, or at no risk, customers can sign up, start participating, and immediately have this relationship that they are going to build off in a very, again, beneficial way. So we all think that's really exciting. Another key thing or interesting thing I want to call out here is that the photo in kind of the top middle, the New York City Housing Authority is one of our partners. We've have a number of residents that are subscribed in those buildings, and these panels are actually spread across a number of housing projects, including Mercy Project, which is where Jay-Z famously grew up. So it's exciting to see that. But again, the other thing, that's like the tangible benefit for community solar subscribers. You get those savings. But the other benefits of community solar are, again, as I mentioned earlier, the local job creation, right, for people that are building and maintaining these solar panels. And then also all the other more, I don't want to say intangibles, but the other benefits, like we're seeing, especially in like New England right now, they have so much community solar and rooftop solar that they're able to take away these peaker plants, which are, for those that don't know, like a peaker plant, over half the power plants in the US operate for fewer than 2 weeks a year. These are the most inefficient and dirty power plants. In New England, because again, they have so much of this distributed solar, they're actually deferring and they've made determinations that they no longer need to build additional ones, because this solar energy is covering that additional capacity they expect in the future. So that obviously means cleaner neighborhoods, cleaner air, lower asthma rates, so less acidification in the local water. Like, there are so many added benefits of those local generation, that's something that is inherently a part of community solar. So yeah, those are some of the key benefits that we see with this product today.
Well, that's great, and I think we're really kind of aligning towards a good, robust conversation. We want to make sure we have space for the audience, but the last kind of round robin section I wanted to kick to is, understanding that our audience is a lot of building professionals, as well as people who care about the environment and are trying to find ways to bring this both into their work and maybe into their own homes. Twilight, you want to kick to the next slide? So I'd love to, get you guys to talk about like, where do we take these concepts now? So talk a little bit about resources you have or you might recommend for people to be thinking about as they, look at their rooftop or another rooftop, or, look at a big untapped source of additional heat or other things. Yeah, we'd love to share some of the resources that are out there, both for consumers and for design teams to think about this. So let's start with Marina, because I know you have a robust practice looking at these things and vetting things for the benefit of consumers. And actually, a question came up in the chat that maybe is a good time to address, which is how the rates and structures and pricing are kind of starting to shake out. If you can talk about it with that community geothermal project in West Woodlawn. So, Marina, could you talk us through some of your consumer resources, and then we'll keep populating the chat and try to address everything that's come up in the meantime.
Great, yeah. So community solar is a great program. It can sometimes be hard to navigate, especially because there are a lot of different companies floating around doing similar things. So, sometimes consumers don't really know where to start. So CUB has created this resource called Solar in the Community. You can either find it at the URL solarinthecommunity.com or just under our resources tab on the general CUB website. But we have worked to create kind of a comprehensive place to find information about community solar. So how does it work? What is it? There's a video. And if we go next slide, we can kind of zoom in on those tabs. So like, how is this possible? We actually talk about some of the state legislation and programs that allow community solar to work well in the state, different community solar deals. So who are the different companies? If you get something in the mail and you want to make sure that they are a legit community solar provider, you can go to our website and, double check our list, make sure they're on there. There are about a dozen companies. So again, it can be hard to keep track of. This is a little screenshot of one page of our comparison chart on our website as well. So we list all of the companies side by side, and they all differ slightly. So I think seeing them listed out this way can make your decision on which company to choose a bit easier. We also have more information on doing community solar through Solar for All, which is the state income eligible program. And then, our FAQ section also addresses some of those random fringe questions that relate to community solar. So I think this resource has been great, and it's probably the most visited page on our site. So, you can tell people are really using it. And again, I think that education is really important when it comes to community energy systems in general, because sometimes people don't really know right off the bat why this may be a benefit to them. And then to answer the rate structure question, so there's a question in the Q&A asking, for the geothermal pilot, how those conversations about rate structure have been going and what we're considering. And unfortunately, I do not really touch that part of the project, but our emails will pop up at the end of the presentation. Please write it down and email me, and I can get you connected to the right person on our team if you're curious to learn more.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's a great segue to, I'd love to hear from the other panelists about, resources. Obviously, the consumer is a pretty easy thing, but or node at which to engage with these things. But from Tom and James, I'd love to, have any resources or kind of thinking points or talking points from you guys about what might make a project site like good to think about developing in a community energy system. Either if that is that enough to get you guys rolling? Kind of things that especially our design professionals want to think about from and any resources or tools that might be available as people are kind of thinking about this from a project development standpoint.
Sure. I think if there's more than one building involved, then think about it to some extent. I mean, at least on the thermal energy network, district energy, 2 farmhouses a mile apart, maybe not a good fit. Suburban greenfield developments, there's been a lot of good ambient loop projects that have, been popping up throughout the US that work. But again, I think, large real estate developments, definitely, there's a huge cost advantage to distributing that heat around. So, real estate developers doing larger projects, larger developments, municipalities, I mean, for sure, there's, complexities to that if there's, not infrastructure in place, but it still ends up making sense in the long run. So the denser the area, the more it makes sense to distribute that kind of diverse heating and cooling load cost effectively.
Great. So I'm definitely hearing from a thermal perspective, density and maybe diversity of load is a factor. James, I know you were typing. You're doing double duty here. I saw you answering some resource questions there. But can you talk a little bit how from the development side, if you're looking at people with like large amounts of land or that are doing new project development, like how would you talk to or anything that you want to share with people in our audience that are kind of working on the development side, and how to think about where and when and how to integrate with community systems, like from your perspective?
Yeah, so great question. So just with the one caveat that Arcadia doesn't develop the projects, we just handle all the customer facing elements like bill pay and customer education and acquisition. But we work closely with these developers all the time. So yeah, so there are a lot of things. I mean, if it's a large tracts of land, like there are obviously a lot of valuable things. Some of it gets very complicated where it's involving like the local distribution grid from the utility and kind of like what is the capacity rating of the local inverters and things like that, which is just well, some entities make it inherently very difficult to actually access that information, but it is available. But the bigger things are what I'd say to like focus on is again, these projects have guaranteed revenue for 30 years. So what that means is if you're talking like a farmer or like you have a warehouse or any kind of large building, if they want to have a guaranteed revenue that's fixed for 30 years, community solar might be a very good fit. And that's great. Like, so there are places where you can do, like sometimes with large rooftops, we're kind of competing with telecom, right? So like 5G towers going up, things like that, or just rooftop pools, community space, things like that. So, but we're seeing more and more of, the cost competitiveness of the longer contract with community solar, creating opportunities that like won't always be there. So yeah, I mean, I think I think I would just focus on like the fixed guaranteed revenue stream, and kind of like keep that in mind.
Yeah. So fixed and guaranteed are interesting concepts because what's today? Wednesday. Monday there was a bunch of crazy storms that came through, and I think this is actually an interesting question from the audience, and I want to address it. Right, we're doing a lot of this, to try to manage future climate change and climate risk, but we're also subject to it. So I think it was an interesting question of from was it Nicole, in saying, what happens if a solar farm's destroyed? What happens, to the community energy, the inputs and the outputs there? And especially James having a portfolio across a lot of different states and things like that. Like, how does the actual underlying generating asset, how is that affected by weather interruptions, things like that? I think we'd love to understand that, and maybe how this fits into the bigger picture of just the energy system.
Yeah, good question. So first, like, yeah, these events happen, but they're rare. As I mentioned, the chat panels today usually come with 20 to 50-year warranties that almost always cover things like hail and extreme weather. So they're like remarkably durable. So like those kind of things are rare. I'd also say, solar as a technology is intermittent, right? This, you basically get 8 peak hours a day of solar, right? The sun doesn't shine at midnight. But it is the most reliable source of energy we have besides nuclear power. What I mean by that is it's very easy to predict when the sun is going to shine and when it will not, with extraordinary high efficiency. Whereas like with gas or coal, like you have like unexpected outages for a variety of reasons, like moving parts that break, that just don't exist with solar. So yes, these things are possible, but it's more rare with solar than other types of energy. And you see that after huge storms too, of like, it's solar and then sometimes wind that are like the first things that are up and running right after a big storm, like we just saw the hurricane in Houston. But to the point about what happens if like a solar farm or any power plant gets knocked offline. So there's a lot there. So first, when FERC, which is the federal authority that kind of regulates the entire US power grid to some degree, the easiest way to think of it is like whenever there's they always have one more power plant than they need. So one in any region can go down and then the others can always compensate for it. If you have more than that, you can have other issues. But so first, like there are substantial redundancies, very expensive redundancies built into the system. But then, like, even if you subscribe to a community solar project, the electrons on the grid, there's no difference between, right, a solar one versus wind or gas, coal. It's all the exact same on the grid. And like water, electrons just take the easiest, shortest path possible. So even if you're subscribed to a community solar project or one, you might be getting electrons from some completely different source. And so that's just like how the grid operates. You would still get your savings, in your bill credits and be able to participate and claim that participation. But the actual electrons probably aren't from that specific solar field. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same as any power plant going out of just, the grid is kind of made to compensate for mistakes or, things that get knocked offline.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate that. I think it's something to consider that, this is it's integrated into the broader system. And yeah, Tom, do you want to touch briefly on any kind of resilience components of community energy system from your perspective? Like,
Yeah,
I
think again, conventional district energy systems are, way more reliable than individual furnaces in houses, right? I mean, the furnace goes down, I don't know, what do you do? Similar to what James mentioned, if one heat pump goes down, there's typically 2 more, there's redundancy built in at a central plant. Ambient loop systems, there's still a little bit of an issue there, or maybe not an issue, but there's, still reliability, at least on the heat source side of things. So still have the heat pumps in the buildings, but you're relying on a very consistent geothermal heat source typically.
Great.
Still more reliable than just having a furnace. So.
Yeah. Well, we are almost out of time here, so I'm going to address one last question that came up from Alexis in the chat, and her question is, what are the current challenges, technical, policy-wise, with the Illinois programs specific to multifamily households? And I think I work a lot in multifamily affordable housing, so I'm certainly interested in the multifamily perspective. I think a lot of the audience also works in multifamily design development operations. So kind of broadly speaking, you see the question too, if you can briefly talk on specific aspects of the multifamily sector as we're thinking about community energy systems, and then we'll hand it back to Twyla real quick for closing thoughts. And again, to plug the survey, please review us, let us know how we did, if we answered all your questions. But yeah, a quick round robin on multifamily from your perspectives.
Trying to think. I think, one thing with multifamily housing, it kind of depends if it's master metered or not. So, if everyone in that building pays their own electric utility bill, then again, things like community solar can be a really wonderful way to go solar a lot more easily than, you know, traditional rooftop solar. I know that it can get a bit trickier if the building is master metered, and the landlord would have to be the one to take initiative and somehow connect you to the benefits of solar. So I think that's one kind of issue that can be worked through more, is kind of that ownership piece.
Yeah, I'll just second. Yeah, like the, you know, master meter, or the, you know, individually metered units, it's like the benefits are individual customers can directly sign up, but the complications are you might only get 10% or just a couple people there sign up, right? Which is fine and good for those, but you can't get everyone. We also see situations where there are individually metered units, but the landlord still pays them. Those tend to also be easy to subscribe. And the last are with those master metered buildings. One of the upsides with community solar is they are usually credit worthy, right? They usually have like a 50-year contract with HUD or something like that. And we're able to sign like a long-term contract with them, which that lowers the price of the overall project, and it's a lot less risky than having individual customers because it's like a commercial grade, again, credit-backed entity. So there are some great ways for that. I think one of like the challenges for the industry is figuring out ways for the landlords to meaningfully pass on savings to the individual tenants and not just having like a windfall for an out-of-state, housing developer.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll just put in a plug, again, pun, I guess, was intended, that if you're transacting electrons, it helps support electrification of multifamily buildings, because the heat pumps can operate even if they can take advantage of the cost arbitrage or the cost reductions from that community solar. So anyway, lots more to explore on that. We have more programs coming. Let's wrap it up. Twyla, please send us out into the world here.
Yeah, thank you all for attending, and speakers, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today. I just want to remind everyone that if you need AIA credit for this, please submit the survey that I just sent in the chat, and we'd love to get your feedback on our program as well in the survey link that was sent right before that. Yeah, again, thank you all. This will be recorded and sent out to everyone in a follow-up email with any resources that the speakers want to provide and contact information. Thank you all and have a great afternoon.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Everyone.